and its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top story tonight, the government is launching a review to find out why some mobile phone users did not receive today's emergency test alert. At 3 p.m, most people received a message on their home screen along with a sound and vibration for up to 10 seconds. However, users on some networks, including 3, did not. There's also been reports that some have not been able to make or receive calls since that test. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says the alert could save people's lives in the future.
It's the case that this has been developed with the National Cyber Security Centre, which forms part of GCHQ. There will be very strict procedures in place for its authorisation, and it will only be used in a situation where your viewers' lives are in danger. I'm determined that there is a very high bar for the usage of this.
The Prime Minister has hailed the brave efforts of the UK's armed forces after they helped British diplomats and their families to escape fighting in Sudan. They carried out complex missions in the capital, Khartoum, alongside other allies. Hundreds of civilians have died in the violent conflict between the Sudanese army and a rival paramilitary group. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the government is continuing to ensure the safety of British nationals who remain in the country.
We have taken the decision to temporarily close the embassy and to relocate our embassy staff. That gives us the best opportunity to project our diplomatic support back into Sudan, but we remain absolutely committed to support British nationals in Sudan. We will do so in close coordination with our international partners. But the best thing that we can do to support British nationals, and indeed everyone in Sudan, is push the generals involved in this conflict to bring it to an end, and that will remain the priority of our diplomatic focus in the region.
Diane Abbott has been suspended as a Labour MP pending an investigation after she claimed that Jewish people are not subject to racism. In an article for the Observer newspaper, the former Shadow Health Secretary said Jewish people experience prejudice, like Irish or red-headed people, but not racism. She's since withdrawn the remarks and apologised for any offence caused. However, the Labour Party has called the comments deeply offensive and wrong. The Home Secretary says it's crucial that the government has the power to deport migrants without being blocked by the European Court of Human Rights. In the Sunday Telegraph, Suella Braverman said for Britain to be, quote, truly sovereign, it needs to be able to decide who enters our territory. This comes after 11 small boats carrying nearly 500 people crossed the English Channel yesterday. And 2 new pictures of Prince Louis have been published as he celebrates his 5th birthday today. He's been photographed being pushed in a wheelbarrow by his mother. Louis is expected to accompany his siblings in the procession from Westminster Abbey during the King's coronation next month. We're on TV, online on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Time now for Free Speech Nation.
A UK rapper and comedian has his tour cancelled for saying that men can't get pregnant. Diane Abbott claims that Jewish people don't face racism. And celebrities on Twitter have a meltdown because Elon Musk took their precious blue ticks away. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics. And of course, we'll have the latest from our friendly neighbourhood culture warriors and their valiant efforts to cancel every sentient human being on the planet. Coming up on the show tonight, we'll be speaking to the successful comedian and rapper No Hun, who has had tour dates cancelled by some venues because he said men cannot get pregnant. An alarming report for the Women's Rights Network has revealed the shocking extent of sexual violence suffered by women in UK hospitals where you think they might be safe. We're going to be talking to the report's author, Professor Joe Phoenix. And we'll be hearing from lawyer Sarah Phillimore about the Non-Crime Hate Incidents Day of Action set to take place on May the 20th as activists fight back against curbs on free speech. Also, actor James Dreyfus will be here to pay tribute to the great comedian and entertainer Barry Humphries, who very sadly passed away yesterday. And of course, myself and my wonderful panel will be answering questions from our beautiful studio audience. All that and much, much more tonight on Free Speech Nation. Let me introduce my studio guests this evening, Scott Capurro and Leo Kearse. How are you both? Looking very dapper.
Well, I just wanted to dress nicely for you.
For me?
Yeah.
To compensate for me.
You look a bit tired, that's all.
Yeah, I knew you would say.
Yeah, yes, I thought.
And it is true. Leo always looking smart.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I actually forgot my shirt, so I'm just glad my T-shirt doesn't have baby sick on it.
Yeah.
I do have a baby.
Right.
Yeah. That explains that one. Let's get some questions from the audience to kick off. Our first question is from Jonathan. Where's Jonathan? Hiya.
Hi. Will you be keeping your blue tick on Twitter?
Yeah, so everyone's gone a bit mad, haven't they, at the moment? So Elon Musk said that he was going to take away what they call the verification tick, the blue tick on Twitter. And these were previously used to sort of show accounts that are celebrities or public figures, and that would prevent impersonation. That was the idea. And now Elon Musk has introduced this new idea where anyone can buy one for $8 a month. But you do get benefits with that, don't you, Leo? You get, like, longer videos, longer tweets. Seems reasonable to me, but the celebrities are a bit upset.
Yeah, and you can edit your tweets for half an hour after you've posted.
Which
I know
is
this.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I know this because I've bought one.
Yeah.
So it's great, and I think it's good value. What I think is really crazy is a lot of public sector organisations are refusing to pay for the blue tick when they should, particularly as they could probably offset it as some sort of against climate change, because Elon Musk developed the most successful electric cars in history.
That's true. That's one way of looking at it. Are you going to get a blue tick?
No, I'm not important enough. I'm not as tall and important as Leo is. But also, it's just hard that when something's been given free, to charge because people love free stuff. You know what I mean? Like, remember when Netflix wasn't charging, and then they started charging and thought it would fall apart, it wouldn't go anywhere, and then they've done quite... People get used to it after a while.
But it's a bit weird, isn't it, when you have all these millionaires sort of saying, there's no way I'm paying for a blue tick. You've got millions of
That's
pounds.
why they're millionaires, because they're cheap.
Because they're cheap.
Yeah,
no,
totally.
Exactly. Now, what about this thing, though, Leo? I mean, the thing is, it was initially intended to say, look, this is a public figure, so that when someone else set up an account under the same name, which they have done, like you get these fake accounts calling themselves Barack Obama or whatever and saying terrible things and making him look bad.
Yeah.
So there is a point to that. But for years now, Twitter have just been awarding blue ticks to people they agree with and taking them away from people they don't agree with. So actually, it's a bit redundant anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real problem. I mean, Twitter was so ideologically captured that they were just rewarding leftists with the blue tick, and they really wanted to push, you know, anybody with any sensible ideas off the platform.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing, and that's why Elon had to come in and actually buy. I mean, it all came because Elon likes memes, and they banned the Babylon Bee.
And he likes free speech.
He likes free speech.
But, you know, to be honest, it's not great for free speech, is it, when we have to depend on multi-billionaires to sort of buy up the social media platforms to enforce it?
We just have to make sure that Elon Musk continues being successful so he can continue to buy things. I want him to buy the BBC and the NHS next.
I think that people are angry, though, because they think he's so rich, why should I give him £8 or $8 a month? Why, when he has so much money?
Well, I guess, I mean, look, I've done it because it's a good service. I love the edit button.
The edit's great.
Because
I had to read it. Oh, me too.
You know, the idea of putting out a spelling error, it keeps me up at night.
Without the apostrophe, oh, God.
Oh, I know.
I know, me too. But I also think that he gets a lot of bad press. It's weird because people keep saying that he's only representing himself in conservative press, but he had an interview on the BBC the other night.
Yeah, exactly.
He spreads himself quite thin, actually.
Yeah, no, he'll talk to anyone. OK, we're going to get another question now. This is from Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi there. What has snooker got to do with climate change?
It's a very good question. We must have all seen this. There were these climate protesters. They got arrested because they went to the Crucible in Sheffield. This is the World Snooker Championships. You can see the video going on there on the screen now. And someone jumped on the table, an activist, and spilled lots of what looks like orange powder, this sort of rust-coloured powder, started screaming. It really messed up the balls, and you know, I think the players must have been a bit upset about that, Leo, you know? But I suppose, you know, this guy thinks he's saving the world from Armageddon through the medium of snooker.
Well, Ronnie O'Sullivan was happy when he heard there was some powder on the table. But yeah, this is ridiculous. I mean, out of all the sports, I mean, it's not exactly drag racing, you know what I mean? By which I mean, you know, the thing done with cars, not getting actual drag queens and racing them, which is a very carbon-neutral sport. But snooker is completely human-powered. The balls are just pushed along by a little stick. I've watched it. There's no internal combustion engines. This is the most carbon-neutral sport. Really, they should be encouraging people to play snooker instead of, you know, powerboat racing.
Yeah, what's the logic there?
Well, they actually said, the protesters said, we're doing this because so many people came to this event on trains and in cars and on buses, and all of that fume that they released is going to ruin the environment.
And I suppose the protesters got there on a rickshaw.
They actually hitchhiked, apparently, or they rolled in on their parents' money. I don't know what they did, but they're blaming the fans who paid actually a lot of money to see that event.
This is the thing again and again with the climate activists, is that they often end up annoying the public when they should be trying to get the public on side if they really cared about the...
There are probably people in that room who might have agreed with them if they hadn't done that.
Right.
Yeah, and sent him in with powder.
That happened a lot, didn't it, when you had... Was it either Extinction Rebellion or Intellect Britain who prevented ambulances from getting to the hospital? That's not a way to win over hearts and minds.
No, absolutely, particularly when those hearts have stopped because they couldn't get to the hospital.
Right.
It's disgusting. And particularly when you can reduce... If Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion really believed that everybody should reduce their carbon footprint to zero, they could lead by example and reduce theirs to zero using one simple trick.
And what's that?
You put a plastic bag over your head for about half an hour.
They could buy a blue tick and support Elon, who, as you said, created electric cars.
He made the Tesla.
They could do that.
OK, we should just point out that we do not endorse putting bags over your head. There we go. Our next question is from Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hello. Should single-sex schools be able to reject transgender pupils?
So this is an interesting one. So there's been a lot of back and forth over this, and the government's finally drawn up these guidelines about single-sex schools and saying that they should be able to reject transgender pupils. And the guidance would also allow teachers to refuse to call pupils by their preferred pronouns. And, of course, this has been prepared by Education Secretary Gillian Keegan and Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch. I often wondered about this because if I know people who work in single-sex schools, and what happens when a person in the school changes gender identity? Say it's a girls' school, and one of the people says, "Well, now I'm a boy." Shouldn't they kick them out?
No.
Because if they don't kick them out, they're not respecting their gender identity, right?
No, but I mean, it's just something that children are doing for attention. So what you do is you say, "That's nice, dear," and continue about your day as if nothing has happened.
But what if the people in question genuinely suffers from gender dysphoria? This is an authentic feeling.
Yeah.
You can't really apply that criteria then, can you?
I mean, I guess you can't. But I mean, this new ruling will just it will give teachers the option to refuse to sort of go along with it. Teachers are all still going to go along with it because they're all ideologically captured as well.
So this is interesting because in Ireland, of course, there's a case at the moment of a teacher who refused and still refuses to use the preferred pronouns of
a male teacher.
But, however, Scott, you know, whatever you think about this, that is called compelled speech. That is a sort of short step towards authoritarianism, isn't it?
I'm not quite sure why, though, it's become such an issue, you know, such a huge global media issue. It's grabbed so much attention when really it's a very intimate decision you make when you're that age to push forward who you think you are. This is someone speaking as someone who's closeted until university. It's very difficult in high school to be who you are. I think it's very brave of these kids to say who they think they are. They're aware of the pressure that will happen.
But there are problems with this, aren't there? Because we have practitioners who are pushing kids onto puberty blockers, which almost always lead to cross-sex hormones and irreversible changes to the body.
I do.
When, in fact, it isn't dysphoria at all. There are other factors involved, and that is serious.
Well, it's good that they put guidelines forward, because if there's anything schools are good at, usually it's following rules. So maybe this will help them make its decision.
But people are angry about it. Activists are very angry about this.
Yeah, which activists? I get so confused by the subject. It's like, if it's a girl and she wants to be a boy, she's in a girl's school, can't they just say, you can be whatever you want, darling, but when you're at school, you wear a skirt, your name is Cindy?
The concern, though, is that if you have a male-bodied individual who wants to go into girls' toilets, that's surely a massive problem.
Right, so, but yes, I understand a male-bodied person, but these are children who haven't undergone the surgery yet and haven't undergone the hormones, or they're on hormones.
But this is the problem. I mean, the children are getting caught up in this social contagion, and we've seen rates of bulimia and anorexia just completely drop to pretty much zero in schools, while transgenderism has risen. So it's replacing bulimia and anorexia as a teenage girl's way of taking ownership over their body, you know, desexualizing their body.
Well, that's good because kids eat too much.
Yeah,
but this is a good thing.
But then, I mean, like anorexia, you can just have a sandwich and, hey, I'm cured. Right. You know, that's, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure it's that simple. Right. But with transitioning, you can't just grow your genitals back, and you can't undo the damage done by puberty blockers and hormones.
OK, we're going to move on now to another question. This is from Katie. Hi, Katie.
Yes. Should Dominic Raab resign as an MP?
So this was the big news. Dominic Raab resigning after an inquiry found he had acted in an intimidating and aggressive manner towards civil servants. Well, civil servants are annoying, aren't they? Leo, what do you think?
I can't believe only in the public sector can people complain that their boss is making them do work and the boss gets fired. You know what I mean? These civil servants should be fired. It's absolutely ridiculous. We've got an activist, woke civil service. I mean, the whole public sector is pretty left-wing, that are trying to unseat and dethrone elected representatives who are telling them what to do instead of doing what they're told to do.
Do we know what was said? You know, do we know the extent? You know, was it intimidation? Was it?
Well, one of the examples given was he was handed some work and he said, this work isn't good enough. Now, I'm guessing that work genuinely wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Another example was that he threw cherry tomatoes at someone. So have you ever worked in the public sector? The only way you can get people to move is by throwing your lunch at them.
Saying that work wasn't good enough. I mean, when I was a teacher, I used to do that all the time. Is that? But did I bully those kids?
You did, and that's why you were fired. But I wonder if this. There were a lot of, like, 86 different allegations brought against him. Only 2 had, you know...
It's not a bad hit rate.
Yeah, only 2 actually went forward, the ones you mentioned. And I think he's quite shocked and surprised. It would have been good, though, if the Prime Minister had stepped in and done his job as a civil servant and fired Raab. I think it makes him look weak.
But find him overthrowing cherry tomato. This is a salad-related assault.
The problem is this bully stuff about Raab has been floating around him for quite some time, not just these 2 things. It's about a year and a half.
But it's just being used as a weapon to get rid of
So
him.
the Prime Minister should have just stepped in and said, this is being used as a weapon, get out. He's replaceable.
So that is the problem, though. We live in a culture where, you know, people can weaponise this. I'm not saying workplace intimidation doesn't happen, workplace bullying doesn't happen, and that shouldn't be addressed. Of course it should be addressed. But there is always the possibility that someone could say, I perceive that I was being bullied.
Yes.
And therefore, because they really want someone fired. I mean, look, teachers face it all the time. The vast majority of complaints against teachers from pupils are because the pupils know those teachers get suspended pending investigation, they get their own back.
I mean, again, none of this might have happened. This might have been avoided if we had a strong prime minister. But maybe he could have stepped in and had the civil servants fired or dealt with Raab in private. The problem also is that Raab has not apologized.
But maybe he doesn't think he did anything.
That's a problem too.
He shouldn't apologise. If anything, he should be promoted.
But two of the allegations brought forward were shown as having some sort of legitimacy, so he should apologise for those.
Leo, final word?
Well, I think it's ridiculous that civil servants who aren't elected can decide who they get to be ruled by. People elected Dominic Raab to tell the civil service what to do, to enact those policies. So the civil service can't pick and choose what they do. We've got a woke activist blob running the country, and
well,
there's
only
nothing we can do about it.
really, and he's going to be. I think he's going to be recalled by his own constituency. I think his political career is over.
Well, this has been a healthy debate, but that's all we got time for in this section. But coming up on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by comedian and rapper No Hun, who has had some of the dates on his tour cancelled because he said, wait for it, men can't get pregnant.
Ooh.
Shocking stuff. Back shortly.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. A rapper and stand-up comedian has had some of the dates on his tour cancelled after he said that men can't get pregnant. No Hun, who posts videos on TikTok and Instagram to almost 1 million followers, was accused of transphobia after making the remarks. He'll tell us more in a moment, but first, let's take a look at No Hun in action.
Let's get into the fact now. Everybody mad that I'm getting in my bag now. You man are still living in a crap house with the windows all smashed out, and you should already know that my manoeuvres are planned out. When I walk in a room, stand up and don't move till I sat down. Wait, what's that sound? Sounds like a lot of money in my bag now. Every day I'm getting packed now, so give myself a pat on the back now. Pulse for a pic with a fan now. Think I might book a spontaneous trip to Japan now.
No Hun, real name Rory Williams, joins me now. Good evening. Of course, No Hun, you're more comedian than rapper these days, aren't you?
Yeah.
You do both of those things.
Yeah.
And so what was the tour? Was it mostly a comedy tour that you were doing?
Stand-up comedy tour, yeah.
And how many venues have pulled the...
7 pulled out.
7?
Yeah.
So I think for the viewers' benefit, perhaps it would help if we understood what it was that you said and who you said it to and why it caused such offence.
OK, so basically, obviously it comes to my attention, there was a lot of, I call them trans extremists, you know. I've seen videos of men marketing women's sanitary towels and women's bras, and I went into Primark and I made a video trying on maternity wear, and somebody commented on the video and said, I find this offensive, I'm a pregnant man. And then I said, well, men can't get pregnant. And then
And that's the key phrase, men can't get pregnant.
Men can't get pregnant.
Scientific facts.
Yeah.
Can get you in trouble. But of course, you know, we've seen people like Dylan Mulvaney, you know, biological male advertising women's sportswear.
Well, that was what
that was
what started it.
And a lot of people don't really understand why that women find that offensive. But of course, it's kind of offensive, isn't it?
Of course, it's an infringement on women's spaces and women's rights.
Now, I should say that, you know, you were accused of transphobia, hate. The Pink News said that you were harassing people on Instagram because you'd used this phrase more than once. You'd used the phrase, men can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
What do you say when people say that you've been harassing people? How do you respond to that?
Well, I haven't harassed nobody, I just spoke fact. I mean, is it harassment to speak fact?
Well, some people would say that it is, apparently.
Not in my world.
No.
No.
Do you get concerned, because you've also had Attitude magazine, people going after you now. Attitude magazine said that they felt that you probably suffered from internalised hatred.
I really, I hate that. I mean, for me, look, when I think about it, when people come at me and say those kinds of things, I think, well, how come you can have your opinion but I can't have my opinion? That's just my opinion. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me inside. That's just how I see the world. I'm actually very happy in myself. I'm very confident in myself. That's why I feel like I can express my opinions. And I feel like when they say statements like that really they're sort of deflecting back onto you.
I mean, that particular statement from Attitude magazine also suggested that you were the equivalent to Vladimir Putin, or it was very extreme,
really
saying that you were inciting violence. So let's just clarify. They accused you of calling trans people mentally ill. Pink News accused you of saying that trans people are a freak show. But you were very specifically talking about the minority of extremist activists, not trans people as a whole.
No,
Am I
not
right?
trans people as a whole at all, no, just the extremists. And I feel like it's the extremists that have the loudest voice, especially in the media and on social media. You know, these are the kind of clips that we're seeing coming from extremist trans people. They're not a real representation of the trans community, but unfortunately they have the loudest voice because a lot of people are so scared to speak out about them.
And a lot of people will say, but wait a minute, this is the LGBTQIA plus community.
XYZ.
XYZ, I probably missed a couple of letters. Okay, that's a hate crime.
Yeah.
But that you're part of that community, and that's why they're saying this is internalised hatred. Do you think there's a problem here? Because you did do a video where you said that you were sick of the word community. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, for me, when I'm looking at transgender and I'm looking at LGB and T, they're very much different things. You know, one aspect is sexual orientation, the other is a gender dysphoria. I don't see how they can be tied under the same umbrella.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense to me because they're not the same thing.
How would you feel if some of the activists said we'd want a conversation with you about it and have a discussion rather than... Because you've had a lot of abuse as a backlash to this.
Yeah.
Has that surprised you, that sort of approach?
Well, not really, no. I mean, because I spoke fact. I said that men can't get pregnant. That was a fact. No one has came back at me with a fact. They've just came with abuse. So you still haven't responded to the statement that I made, which is that men can't get pregnant.
No, so it's as though that's all they've
just deflected by abusing me, yeah. And it doesn't bother me because, you know, you're entitled to your opinion, I'm entitled to mine, but it's obviously very clear I'm not entitled to mine, but you can still have yours.
And some of the abuse has been quite racist.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's clearly a double standard going on here.
Definitely, yeah.
You know. So what will you do now in terms of the tour? Because you say a few venues have said no, we're not doing it. Can you explain to us why you think they would do that? Because surely you're selling tickets for them, you're making money for them. Why would they suddenly say, well, we won't have you on then?
So I knew that some of the extremists had contacted the venues already. So I emailed all the venues and gave them a heads up.
Yeah.
I said to them, I'll give you till 5 o'clock tomorrow, and if I don't hear from you, then I presume that you're still going ahead. If you wish to pull out, email me. And then when I woke up the next morning, 7 of them had just pulled out with no explanation. And then obviously what for me now, there's other artists that are touring at those venues that share the same views as me, that have been just as vocal, but their tours haven't been cancelled, but my tours have. That's what I can't really grasp what that's about.
So why would that be? Is it because the activists have made more of a noise when it comes to you?
I'm guessing so, yeah.
But, I mean, there's a real issue of freedom of speech here, isn't there? You know, I mean, you as an artist, as a creative, should be able to express yourself in whatever way that you want, and yet the people who run the venues are saying no. I mean, do you think this is a problem that's getting worse in society more generally?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's cancel culture, you know, people have an opinion, say something that doesn't align with what the minority, because it's usually the minority of people that have the loudest voice.
Yeah.
You say something that doesn't align and, you know, career cancelled, shows cancelled, you know, don't want to see you again. But I've never really cared about that. I've always been very vocal, in my opinion. Nothing's changed for me, apart from the fact that I've had to now obviously rearrange my tour. That's the only inconvenience, but I still have my platforms and I still have my audience and I'm still free to express myself.
And of course, your audience, what they find so appealing about you is that you're very plain-spoken.
Yeah.
You know, if you watch your videos, you don't hold back at all. It's almost like you have no censorship filter. You don't have that.
No filter at all, no.
Which is great. That's the whole appeal. So you're mostly on TikTok and Instagram, is that right?
Yeah.
And what sort of thing, just for the people who don't know, what sort of thing do you do on those?
I do loads of different things. It's very, like, in the moment, you know, I don't really have a plan. Like, sometimes I see a news article and I think, well, I'm going to make a video about that today. Sometimes I might go in the shop and make a video about the shop, like I was in Primark.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just make videos about whatever's on my mind. Yeah.
Do you think your behaviour will change off the back of this, like what these activists have done? Have they got to you at all?
No.
Really? Not at all?
Not at all, no.
Because so many people that I have on this show who have been dogpiled online and that kind of thing,
no,
they say...
No, it hasn't fazed me at all. It has not fazed me. All my friends have been phoning me. Are you sure you're OK? Are you sure you're OK? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, but, you know, but I can see why they would think that, because you'd look at all that abuse, you'd look at all that backlash, I think that it would. But I very much stand by my statement, men can't get pregnant. And also, for me, look, I think if you're a woman and you want to transition to a man, that's fine. You know, but if you really transition from a woman to a man and you still keep your womb, then you can't really be a man, because men don't have wombs.
So what you're suggesting is that to state scientific facts shouldn't be a cancelable offence.
No.
And I think your approach of not doing what a lot of people do, which is they issue an apology.
I'm not doing the apology. The influencer apology. I'm sorry. No, I'm not apologising. I don't care. It's caused me inconvenience by speaking my mind, but most of my tour is back reinstated now. I'm going to announce it next week. So it's a little inconvenience, but it hasn't really caused me any harm.
And actually, that's a really good example to set, because every time I see someone make that apology, you know, when they get scared because of the dogpiling, it makes it worse. Like, people get more of an appetite to go after you.
Yeah, I'm not sorry.
Well, that's a brilliant message. Before we go, can you just tell people where can they find information about your tour and where can they see you?
So on my Instagram, my TikTok, I'm going to be announcing it properly, officially on sale Friday.
Yeah. And it's No Hun, that's how they find it?
No Hun on Instagram, NOHUN, yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Rory Williams, thanks so much for joining me. Really
Thanks for
appreciate
having me. Thank you.
So coming up on Free Speech Nation, Professor Joe Phoenix will be here to discuss a report for the Women's Rights Network which outlines the shocking extent of sexual assaults in our hospitals. Do not go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. And later on in Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my wonderful panel, Scott Capurro and Leo Kearse. We're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you're sitting at home worrying about any kind of problem, just ask me. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our best to answer your issues. Now, a new report by the Women's Rights Network has revealed the truly shocking numbers of rapes and sexual assaults which are happening in our hospitals, where you would surely expect people to feel safe. According to the report, more than 6,500 rapes and sexual assaults, some against children under 13, have been committed in hospitals in England and Wales over nearly 4 years. Only 265 people, that's a mere 4.1%, are known to have been charged for these offences. Professor Jo Phoenix authored the report, and she joins me now to discuss it. Jo, thanks so much for joining us today. Perhaps if you could talk us through, what is the most significant and shocking element of this report?
Just the sheer scale of it, the sheer scale. I think one of the strange things about this is it's not the first time this sort of stuff has been reported. There were things that were reported in November of last year. And then previously, about 2 years ago, Lancashire, one of the Lancashire newspapers, also reported this, but nobody seemed to pay attention. One of the different things about this report, however, is it comes off the back of the Freedom of Information requests that we made to 43 police forces. As it happens, only 35 responded.
Right.
So Northern Ireland didn't respond. Scotland didn't respond.
Is that legal, though? Are they not meant to with Freedom of Information requests?
Yeah, it's legal not to respond.
It is legal not to respond?
It is legal not to respond. So the two responses can be, we don't hold the data, so we can't give it to you, or to get that data would be prohibitively costly.
I see.
Yeah.
But you wanted to find this data because you were aware that this kind of information has not been out there.
No.
We've just had no way to quantify the extent of the problem.
No, none at all. So the crime survey for England and Wales asks victims where rapes take place. And one of those categories is somewhere else, either in a perpetrator's home or, you know, a victim's home. And a whole series of others. But that somewhere else category accounts for around 19% of rapes reported to the Crime Survey of England and Wales. That somewhere else isn't broken down. Yet we know that there's sexual violence that takes place in hospitals. So this was an attempt to, if you like, get under the bonnet of that and find out what is the shape and size of the problem. Now, I find it quite odd, just as, you know, a criminologist of 26 years now, I find it quite odd that the police don't have a marker on any of the data that they collect that would indicate hospitals. Because, as we said in that report, hospitals aren't somewhere else. Hospitals are a very specific environment where there's often intimate care of one variety or another, and it's also where we are often, as the report title is, are most vulnerable.
Well, quite. So for predatory opportunists, it's the place, you know, obviously there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
But also this was recorded, or the information that you found was from the period of the pandemic.
Quite.
Now, there's issues with that. I mean, you mentioned in your article for the Mail that, you know, of course, people are wearing masks. That's a good way to hide your identity.
Yes.
But at the same time, you would expect during a pandemic there to be heightened security in the hospitals.
Indeed, and there was. I mean, I think the question about, you know, predatory men coming into hospitals, we presume it's men, of course, because, you know, 99% of sexual violence is committed by men. But I presume that that's actually a very low number of people actually coming into the hospitals like that. The stories that have come out, either on Twitter or people who have emailed me directly as a result of the publication of the report, have been stories of junior doctors, physiotherapists, healthcare assistants, basically committing sexual violence. So I think that idea that the sexual offender is somewhere out there, you know, this predatory individual, actually what this report may be indicating is that the sexual predator is in here.
And isn't that the case so often with sexual assaults, case of sexual assaults? It's people that people know or who are residing nearby.
Absolutely. Now, there's something else that's really important about this report. The other thing that we didn't ask for, in retrospect, we maybe should have, but I'd like to go back and ask for it, is the sex of the victims, the actual location in hospitals, and the sex of the perpetrators, right? Now, funnily enough, being able to ask that question, I would never have been able to do it. I don't mean to go back to the Open University, but I would never have been able to do that at the Open University, because even asking a question like that would have had to have gone through the Ethics Committee, and it could have got stuck there.
It might be worth talking to people about, or just explaining what happened to you and your experience at the Open University.
Oh, yes, I've lived it for so long now, I assume everybody knows. I worked at the Open University for quite a while. I hold gender-critical views. I wanted to ask about the competing rights of transgender prisoners and women in prison. I've done, 26 years of sexual violence and crimes against women, so I wanted to ask about that whole question. I had been basically silenced by my colleagues. I was silenced after I got cancelled at Essex University. I then, after the Reindorf report, which was a report into what happened to me at Essex, said that cancelling academics is unlawful. And then after the Maya Forstater ruling, which gave us protected gender-critical rights, I launched the Open University Gender Critical Research Network, and my life descended into what can only be described as just a continuum of hell. There was petitions that were signed, open letters that were put forward. My direct colleagues were asking for us to be discriminated against, for the university to disaffiliate the research network, simply because, and this is where we come back to the question with the report, that research network, its mission was to ask where, why, when, how, and to what effect sex matters.
People will be really shocked I mean, you also got a lot of harassment and abuse, and it was very, we've discussed this before.
Yeah.
And people will be shocked that an academic of such high standing, who is simply asking the questions that an academic, I mean, you're a criminologist, this is your job.
Quite.
But because of the sensitivity around this particular area, that you should be demonised and monstered. As a means to prevent the facts coming out.
Yeah, well, quite. And even in the reaction to the report, interestingly, there on Twitter, if you take Twitter to mean anything. On Twitter, there have been several attempts to brand this piece of research transphobic, which is just crazy in my mind, because what we're actually talking about is, you know, sexual violence in hospitals. But because one of the calls to action is to actually rethink the suspension of Annex B, in other words, to reintroduce single-sex wards, and one of the other calls to action is to actually get the information from the police about whether it's female victims or male perpetrators.
But this is very important, isn't it? Because last year, you know, there was an attempted sexual assault at a hospital in London, and the police were called. The police turned up and said to the members of staff, well, we need to investigate this. And the staff said that it's not possible because there's no men on that ward, knowing full well that there was a biological male who identified as female on the ward. Yeah. So, and that means there are serious stakes here.
There are serious stakes, and it isn't just what's happening in hospitals and the degree to which, for lack of better words, gender identity ideology is underpinning how hospitals are approaching this issue. And I'll just kind of sideways for a second here. Part of the report was looking at the policies that NHS Foundation Trusts use, hospitals use, the Care Standards Quality Commission use, and the push behind all of those policies is to create sexual safety. Right? And they talk about sexual safety incidences. That is the first time in my life I have ever heard sexual violence referred to as sexual safety. And part of that is around, you know, ensuring that gender identity is respected. If you read these policies, they quite literally, and I hate to use the word, but they erase sexual violence. Now, I don't know if I have a second more, but if I have one more second. The other thing that, in the reaction to the report that has come to light, is that the police forces who did answer the FOI didn't take, some police forces didn't take it seriously. Now, I'm just going to mention one, Derbyshire Police Force. If you look on the table that we provide in the report, they were the second highest for rapes and sexual assaults, with just over 1,000, right? Now, when the report landed and it attracted so much media attention, Derbyshire Police Force contacted WRN, and they also made a public statement saying that when they did the FOI, all they did was, in effect, a fuzzy word search for the word hospital on any sexual violence case. So they justified, in one statement that they made, they justified the fact that those numbers were so high because it could have occurred on something like a road called Hospital Road. Right? Now, at that time, when I discovered that, I thought, well, this is ludicrous, because I'm sure there aren't that many hospital roads in the Derbyshire Police Force area. But they've gone back, they've re-looked at their own data, and the numbers come in much lower. There has been, you know, a request to change the data. We're not going to, because that report is an historical report.
But what does that tell you, that there wasn't that diligence about such a serious subject?
Quite.
I mean, that's very, very disturbing.
Well, it's very disturbing when you put it in light of the Casey report and, you know, the question of institutional misogyny within police forces. It's a very serious problem.
Well, it's a really important report, and, you know, I hope it does raise the awareness that needs to be raised as a result. Jo Phoenix, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, actor James Dreyfus will join me to discuss the life of the brilliant comedian and entertainer Barry Humphries, who very sadly passed away yesterday. See you shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. There was some very sad news yesterday when the brilliant Australian entertainer Barry Humphries died at the age of 89. Humphries, of course, is best known for his creation Dame Edna Everage, who hosted chat shows, appeared in films, wrote several books. Made an Officer of the Order of Australia in 1982, Barry Humphries was honoured with a CBE for services to entertainment in 2007. Let's take a look at him in action.
You're looking wonderful. You're ageless.
Well, I'm trying to be ageless. I've had a little work done, but
have you?
Not quite as much as some.
Don't go near me, keep your eyes that
way. No, but the thing is, you are still recognisable. That's what
And to discuss Barry Humphries and his wonderful comic creations, I'm joined by the actor James Dreyfus. Good evening, James. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very good. And you, James, you actually had the honour of working with Barry Humphries. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, that is right. I mean, I can't say I know him and was a friend, but I spent a week in a room with Barry Humphries, Dame Edna Everage, and Les Patterson, and Madge Alsop. So we have 7 full days of watching him create and improvise and talk about his favourite guests, because, of course, the joy of Barry, we all know about his massive intellect and we all know about his artistic talents, but what you don't know, perhaps, is the joy he took in his guests, in interaction.
Yeah, but that's one of the amazing things about him is he was so spontaneously funny. I mean, you put him in an interview situation or with people he didn't know, he could just bring it alive. He just had that at the tip of his tongue. It was amazing skill.
Well, if you let me know when I've got a minute left, I'll end this interview with to read something quickly out from Michael Palin's diary, if I'm allowed.
Yeah,
which will tell you a whole lot about him. But for example, Jeffrey Archer, because you have to enter this world eagerly, don't you? You have to play along, oh Dame Edna. And Jeffrey Archer was a joy to Barry because he not only did he enter the world, he went way over the top. And actually, he was remarkably fond of Jeffrey Archer because Jeffrey Archer could take the most merciless ribbing. And I think that was the joy. I mean, there's that wonderful quote of him when Jeffrey Archer is telling a story, and it's not a very interesting story. And Dame Edna sat back and goes, you could work that up into a nice little anecdote, Geoffrey, which kind of said it all.
Just utterly brilliant. I mean, the thing about Dame Edna in particular is that the act was so subversive. Like, going back many, many decades, it's always been a really sort of edgy, comedic act. But he was doing this into his 90s, and he was set to tour again next year. Just astonishing.
Yes, he was. Yes, I mean, it's extraordinary. The trouble is, the great thing about him was that actually it's something that withstood the test of time. It was ageless because of his wit, because of his. I mean, and everyone uses the word genius now, and it's garbage most of the time. I mean, but this was a true garbage. This was a true genius, and woe betide you if you didn't play along and you didn't enter into the spirit of it. If you tried to be funnier than him, you were dead. If you were an interviewer, you could see the fear in Aspel's eyes sometimes. You could see the fear, not so much with Parkinson, because Parkinson knew him very well, but they still had to go a very delicate course, and woe betide the guest that didn't know who he was.
And sometimes, even when Barry Humphries was being interviewed as Barry Humphries, he was really funny. You know, when he made that joke about Philip Schofield coming out, but he was addressing it to the other presenter who wasn't, in fact, Philip Schofield. And people fell for it.
That was the genius of him. If you didn't know who he was, you'd think, who's that rather senile, distracted man who doesn't understand? But you can see it in his eyes. And those of us who've grown up with him, you know, my parents used to sort of keep him a secret, rather like Father Christmas, because I was never sure that he was actually a man. And then when I slowly realised he was a man, he used to force ex-prime ministers, Edward Heath, to kiss him. You know, twice when you come. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you know, a man's just kissed a man on television. And it was extraordinarily groundbreaking. I mean, it really was.
And the fact that, you know, he was lauded by, you know, royalty. He could make jokes with royalty in the royal box and that kind of thing. And yet he was, like I say, so subversive. That's a very unusual ability.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking about this last night, I can't think of anyone else on the planet who could have got away with that moment in the royal box. And I mean, credit to Charles and Camilla. I mean, you could tell they had no idea. They might have been told something was going to happen, but he was the only person. And it was 5 words. 5 words, and he brought the house down. Yeah. I mean, that tells you a lot about the talent of Barry Humphries.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, James, I would love you to read this excerpt from Michael Palin. If you would like to, now's your chance.
Can I do it very quickly?
Yes, please do.
Listen a minute. This is during the interval of a show of his, and his manager was overhearing 2 people talking about the show. And one of the wife said to the thing, one was accusing the other of sighing. I wasn't sighing. Yes, you were. You were sitting there sighing all through it. The producer then went to Barry Humphries in the interval and told him this story. And he couldn't believe his ears when halfway through Edna's monologue to a packed 1,500-strong house, Edna told of how she couldn't take Norm to the theatre because he'd just sit there and sigh, and eventually became very combative. Afterwards, Barry said he'd slipped it in because of his enjoyment of the effect it would have on just 2 people. As Barry put it, it would make, for them, a truly uncanny night in the theatre.
Just an absolute consummate performer. Brilliant. James Dreyfus, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Did you ever get to see Dame Edna Everage?
No, I didn't.
So I did a couple of years ago. Right. And it was honestly, when I was at the Palladium, it was one of the funniest shows I've ever seen.
Right, yeah.
And I couldn't quite grasp that this person was in his late 80s. It's like, how can you...
One of the most powerful things I've ever seen on stage, really. And I saw him in San Francisco, and the audience was on the edge of their chairs, and anything he wanted to say to them, he could get away with. Yeah. So he could have just come out and done a bunch of garbage. But every joke was so beautifully scripted, like James was saying. If you're a comedian, actually, too. Everything was so succinct and so limited, and in that way, so strong when it hit its mark. It was just great.
So the show I saw, he was playing Les Patterson for half of the show, and then Dame Edna for the other half of the show. And these 2 characters couldn't really be more different, could they? But he somehow managed to inhabit them. And not only that, when he was spontaneously talking to people as those characters, he could answer as those characters. Yeah. I mean, this is an incredible skill.
He sang in character when I saw him do Dame Edna. There's a piano player. Yeah, and he perched on the edge of the piano and just kicked up his heels and just started singing. The audience was like, what's going on? It was hilarious. Hilarious. Making stuff up, changing lyrics to famous songs, just whatever he wanted.
And never really caring about causing offense.
No, not at all. And I mean, in a way, it's like people so worked up about drag acts and could children get into a drag show? Should they be allowed? I mean, this act just appealed to every age group.
Yeah, well, like James said, he didn't know when he was a kid whether this was a man or a woman.
Yeah.
I did think it was a woman. Yeah. I thought Dame Edna was just a... I thought that's what Australian women were like.
I still believe it's a woman.
Do you?
Yeah.
Thanks, Leo. Typical Leo curse. Well, look, that is the end of our first hour, but honestly, there is so much more to come between now and 9 o'clock. We're going to be going back to our wonderful studio audience for some questions. We've got some questions that have come in from you at home via email, and we're going to be doing our unfiltered dilemmas, where I'm going to solve all your problems, believe you me. But now it's time for a quick break. You are watching Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle, live on GB News, the People's Channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And there's plenty still more to come on Free Speech Nation tonight, including questions from our viewers, and we're going to speak to Denise Farmy, who is taking the Arts Council to an employment tribunal after being harassed for her gender-critical views. But let's get a news update first from Ray Addison.
Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. The government is launching a review to find out why some mobile phone users did not receive today's emergency test alert. At 3 p.m, most people received a message on their home screen along with a sound and vibration for up to 10 seconds. However, users on some networks, including 3, did not. There's also been reports that some have not been able to make or receive calls since that test. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says the alert could save people's lives in the future.
It's the case that this has been developed with the National Cybersecurity Centre, which forms part of GCHQ. There will be very strict procedures in place for its authorisation, and it will only be used in a situation where your viewers' lives are in danger. I'm determined that there is a very high bar for the usage of this.
The Prime Minister has hailed the brave efforts of the UK's armed forces after they helped British diplomats and their families escape fighting in Sudan. They carried out a complex mission in the capital Khartoum alongside other allies. Hundreds of civilians have died in the violent conflict between the Sudanese army and a rival paramilitary group. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the government is continuing to ensure the safety of British nationals who remain in the country.
We have taken the decision to temporarily close the embassy and to relocate our embassy staff. That gives us the best opportunity to project our diplomatic support back into Sudan, but we remain absolutely committed to support British nationals in Sudan. We will do so in close coordination with our international partners. But the best thing that we can do to support British nationals, and indeed everyone in Sudan, is push the generals involved in this conflict to bring it to an end, and that will remain the priority of our diplomatic focus in the region.
Diane Abbott has been suspended as a Labour MP pending an investigation after she claimed that Jewish people are not subject to racism. In an article for the Observer newspaper, the former Shadow Health Secretary said Jewish people experience prejudice like Irish or red-headed people, but not racism. She's since withdrawn the remarks and apologised for any offence caused. However, the Labour Party has called the comments deeply offensive and wrong. The Home Secretary says it's crucial the government has the power to deport migrants without being blocked by the European Court of Human Rights. In the Sunday Telegraph, Suella Braverman said for Britain to be truly sovereign, it needs to be able to decide who enters our territory. This comes after 11 small boats carrying nearly 500 people crossed the English Channel yesterday. And 2 new pictures of Prince Louis have been published as he celebrates his 5th birthday today. He's been photographed being pushed in a wheelbarrow by his mum. Louis is expected to accompany his siblings in the procession from Westminster Abbey during the King's coronation next month. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. You're watching and listening to GB News. Back now to Free Speech Nation.
To Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Let's crack on some questions from our brilliant viewers via email. The first question came in from Spencer. Spencer says, is Elon Musk ever going to make it to Mars? And of course, Elon Musk's company SpaceX designed the most powerful rocket ever, and then it blew up a few minutes after takeoff. But, you know, to get a rocket up there, Leo, like, you've got to give him some credit for that.
Yeah, and something like a rocket, you don't just build the first one and it goes all the way to Mars. You've got to, like, blow up quite a lot of rockets in the atmosphere.
Yeah, well, Musk has been saying that this is actually a success.
Yeah.
A lot of people are looking at thinking, well...
That's what I've been saying about my career as well.
Yeah.
People disagree a lot. You know, the thing is, he's brainwashed so many people he worked with. That one of the women scientists in the office was interviewed on NPR, which is the BBC in the US, and she said, well, you know, this is a success. And America's like, no, it's a waste of money. And she said, no, if we made it past the launching platform, it's icing on the cake after that. It is, because it blew up in front of everybody, and I think that looks disastrous, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it wasn't manned, you know, it's, you know, it's not a tragedy.
Woman.
Oh, woman, sorry.
Gender, Jesus.
So offensive.
It's like being a comedian and trying out new material.
Yeah.
Like, the first one isn't going to be your, you know, closer. You've got to, like, work it up.
But the joke didn't cost $8 billion, though. That's the thing.
That's the only thing. There's the footage.
I mean, it feels that way when you're writing, but it didn't.
You know, that is a significant difference.
It's a lot of money.
But, you know, he spent, what is it, $44 billion on Twitter, which he could never make money out of.
Right.
So clearly he's got money to burn.
But that's why people get upset, that he's got money to burn, but he wants money for that blue tick. That's the thing.
Yeah.
What if he combined them and sent Twitter to Mars?
That would be an interesting way to do it.
That would be nice, yeah.
I think this is a good thing, though, you know, because I think just the aspirational quality of wanting to get to Mars, you know, it's like, takes us back to the 60s when Kennedy was saying we're going to get to the moon.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, well, that's a waste of time. There's nothing on the moon.
Yeah.
But actually, the fact that humankind can do this stuff.
Yeah, but the trouble is that they're right. There is nothing on the moon. And there's nothing on Mars. And also, Mars looks nice and peaceful. I don't know why we'd want to ruin it by putting people...
Setting us up there, really. That they think they found some underground water outlet thing.
Really?
Yes, they did.
Aliens, you mean?
No, well, maybe at some point, but they found. I think they found the equivalent of Louis Chaffer, which is just a lake of nothing. They found some sort of damp.
Yeah.
Yes.
For people who don't know, Louis Chaffer, regular on this channel, and he maybe not for too much longer if he watches this. Let's move on to another question now. Another question came in also via email. This came from George. Hello, George. George says, was Morgan Freeman right about Black History Month? So Morgan Freeman, legendary actor, he said that he felt it was reductive to celebrate his heritage only at a certain time. And he actually, this is the quotation, this is from the Sunday Times. He said, Black History Month is an insult. You're going to relegate my history to a month. And he also said he didn't like the term African American because he said, you say Africa as if it's a country when it's a continent, like Europe. I mean, does he have a point, you know, that they're relegating it to a month, saying we're only going to celebrate Black History in this month and then...
Well, everyone gets a month if they're lucky. The gays get a month. It takes them not long to get the outfits together, but it takes some people... a month is quite a long time. That's every day. That's a lot. Well, in America, it's February, so it's the short month, which that does seem insulting. But anyway, they gave him, you know, I mean, I just enjoy it, revel in it, and then why criticize it?
What point does he make? Is he making the point that, you know, identity politics sorts of encourages us to divide ourselves up and say, well, this time is for you and this time is for you? And
well, and I do think you're right. The word segregation might come into play when you say it like that, dividing.
Yeah.
But I also think that people wanted a bit of recognition, and it seems celebratory to me. I don't know.
Well, no, the gay month is like, it's a different month in America than it is over here. So really, we get 2 months, right?
Yeah, we do. We get we get all year if we're lucky. But it's a lot of work, I think, to put the strategy together to get people to recognize something that's still. What I think it is about it's about saying, look, the African American community, the Black community in the U.S. is still whether under or over, misrepresented in the media, in art and film. I wish that's what he was talking about instead of this.
I was struggling to work out what his objection was. But what do you think, Leo?
Well, I think it's kind of divisive. You know, when you say, oh, this people with this skin colour, they have this month. And, you know, white people, as if, you know, white people are going to go around slapping history books out of any, you know, black people's hands the rest of the year. But it is kind of divisive. I kind of agree with him. And also African-American, I mean, just say American. It's like, and also, you know, people aren't, you know, racially siloed anymore. It's 2023, so...
But you should refer to people how they'd like to be referred to. So if he doesn't want to be called African-American, wants to be called black, that's fine. If someone else wants to be called African-American, then you have to kind of respect that title.
What do you want to be called?
I want to be called progressive.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, you lie.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You're quite Italian, really.
Yeah.
You're Italian-American.
Technically, Elon Musk is an African-American, so...
We all are.
Yeah.
The heritage of the human race is Africa.
Of course, of course. Let's move on to the next question. This is from Jake. Jake has tweeted us. Thanks for tweeting in, Jake. This is a nice tweet, because most of the tweets I get are pretty nasty. But this one's quite nice. Is this the end for Diane Abbott? Simple, straightforward question. I sort of can't believe this story. So Diane Abbott, who, of course, she's just been stripped of the Labour whip by Keir Starmer. And this was a letter she wrote to the Observer newspaper. Now, this just broke today, and if you haven't seen it, it is absolutely astonishing. She's saying that minority groups such as Jewish people, Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people, that they faced levels of prejudice equivalent to those suffered by people with red hair rather than racism. I think Jewish people have faced a bit of racism in the past. I mean, I'm not a historian, but I think it's happened.
Well, yeah, and she said, you know, one of the reasons she gave was Jewish people were never made to sit in the back of the bus. And, I mean, she's right. Jewish people had the whole train, but the train was taking them to a concentration camp. So there is a bit of discrimination
Now, what I should say in her defence, she's saying this was a draft letter on her computer.
Right.
Which she didn't mean to submit to a national publication.
We've all done that.
Everyone's anti-Semitic in the first draft.
But don't you read Don't you read the letters before you send them in?
Not Diane Abbott.
Don't you even...
I think Jeremy Corbyn edited it for her and sent it off anyway.
You think that's...
He was leaning over her shoulder with his robe on.
I mean, come on, this is, you can't go back from this, can you?
Well, you know what? When she's around people telling her how great she is, and Corbyn's telling her how fantastic she is, both in and out of bed for decades, when that happens, then you believe that what you're saying is true. She doesn't think she's done anything wrong. What about gypsies and all that? Well, aren't they angry as well?
But she did issue an apology, and actually...
It's too late. She always does. She always says, I'm sorry, my numbers were wrong, I'm sorry.
She said it was, well, the numbers were, that's a different thing, but she said that it was a draft letter, and she said that she completely withdraws the statement that she made.
I think she's glad she did it. I think she's speaking to a definite a block in that voting group. I think she's trying to put herself out there and say to left-wing people in this country who vote for her that, look, I agree with you that, you know, we're anti-Semitic to the core.
It's just there's gaffes and then there's this.
Yeah.
Like, this is beyond.
But I think Keir Starmer is just absolutely delighted and relieved that he's got an excuse to get rid of her. Because, I mean, she's clearly incompetent. She can't... It's not just that she can't put the right shoes on the right feet. She had mismatching shoes, and she had two left shoes on both her feet, one of which is a right foot. So I don't know if she's just so left-wing that she can't bear to put a right shoe on.
But also, of course, you know, Starmer, you know, wants to purge the left of the party.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely, and that, you know, anyway.
Good idea.
Let's get another question now from Hannah. This is from Hannah, who emailed in, should AI be faking interviews? Now, this was this Michael Schumacher interview, and of course, he's still comatose since his accident in 2013. But there was a fake interview in this German weekly newspaper. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce Die Aktuell. I think that's about right. I didn't need to.
I like the accent.
That was gratuitous.
I'm glad you didn't raise a hand on that, too. That's good.
But the interview was fake, of course. It's been generated by artificial intelligence. And the thing is, so the people behind AI are sort of saying that one day we're going to be able to have you talk to your dead relatives because we can simulate what they would respond. Is this a good idea? I think it's creepy.
Yeah, it's definitely creepy. And I mean, I know we've seen, BuzzFeed, for example, replacing journalists with AI, but that's just to create lists of things that cats do or whatever.
It's to make better journalists for them.
Yeah, replace the interviewee with AI.
Yeah.
That's insane. And then to put it on the front cover, I mean, that's somebody who really maybe they got a mortgage to pay, they had a big bill that month, they thought, we got to sell a lot of copies. Let's pretend we're interviewing Michael Schumacher.
Wait, were they trying to pass this off as a real interview, or did they acknowledge it was AI?
It says at the end that it's generated by AI, but Michael Schumacher was on the front, so you don't find out until it's quite...
Most people don't read the last paragraph anyway, so they don't know, and they think, oh, he's fine, look, he's come out of his coma. And I think he's doing okay, but I don't think he's interview standard. I don't think he is.
No.
But if you can just, like, make up a fake interview and say, oh, we got this great scoop, you know, I mean, this isn't...
They do it all the time. I mean, critics are supposed to go to Edinburgh shows. They don't see the show and they review it anyway. Yeah. This is the arts, baby.
It's funny, when I went to see a Bobby Crush show in London, I sat next to the Times critic who was asleep the whole time.
Right.
And then gave it a mediocre review, and I thought, how dare you? You didn't watch the thing. I'm not going to name names. But anyway...
We know who you mean.
We know. Anyway, coming up next, the Non-Crime Hate Incidents Day of Action coming up next month. Family lawyer Sarah Phillimore will be here to discuss that, and also the ideological capture of the UK police. See you in a few moments.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, following the departure of Dominic Raab from the government, will Home Secretary Suella Braverman be next? In My Take at 10, this week Joe Biden will announce he wants another 4 years in the White House. My reaction. Plus, the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, on Diane Abbott's horrific comments downplaying anti-Semitism. Also, legendary Guardian journalist Polly Toynbee, ex-Tory MP Harvey Proctor, Anne Widdecombe, and tomorrow's papers. We're live from 9.
May the 20th is the birthday of John Stuart Mill, the English philosopher and author of On Liberty, which was published in 1859. And this year, May the 20th, will also be the Non-Crime Hate Incidents Day of Action, as activists highlight police attempts to criminalise people for expressing opinions that don't contravene any laws. The reason for the link with John Stuart Mill is that the philosopher was quoted in the final paragraphs of the judgment in Miller versus College of Policing 3 years ago. Mill said, if all mankind minus one were of one opinion and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. So joining me now to tell me more about the campaign, it's family lawyer Sarah Phillimore. Thank you very much for joining me. I think we need to talk through what's happened with these non-crime hate incidents. A lot of people watching might not know what they are. When did they start and what are they?
Well, the genesis was the very tragic murder of Stephen Lawrence and the recognition that the Met were institutionally racist. So Lord Macpherson wrote a report saying, well, how are we going to tackle this? And one of the key elements of how we would is to say we have to bring in something called perception-based recording. We can't trust the police to listen to people when they say they're victims of racism because the police are racist. Therefore, if anyone comes to the police and say, I perceive I've been a victim of racial hatred, the police must record it and take it seriously and investigate it. Now, that's, all well and good. And I think there's a lot of evidence that the men who did murder Stephen Lawrence, they had recordings of them speaking in very racist terms, inciting violence. I totally accept that it's of use to the police to gather information about things which are not quite yet crimes or which could escalate into crimes. But the problem is that the police then became captured by a prevailing orthodoxy, which is that sex doesn't matter now. What matters is your gender identity. So if you're a man and you think, well, I feel like a woman, that must be respected, and you are a woman. And the reason that Harry's case then came to court is that he fell foul of this orthodoxy
We should explain that. This is Harry Miller, former police officer, who retweeted a poem that was deemed to be transphobic, and someone contacted the police and said, I'm offended by the poem. Police officer visited Harry Miller and said, we need to check your thinking.
Oh, there were 30 tweets in total. That was considered to be the worst. I think it was a song lyric saying, your breasts are made of silicone, your vagina goes nowhere. And Harry was said, well, that's the one that's closest to a criminal offence. The others were simply Harry going, huh? Or asking a question. I mean, it was when they were read out in court, because I was there in the High Court in November 2019, we laughed. Everybody laughed. They couldn't help themselves.
What's unusual about it is that, you know, even when Harry Miller was approached by the police officer and he said, you know, has a crime been committed? And the police officer said no. And then Harry Miller said, but why are you here then? You know, that's what I think people are confused about, is why are the police recording non-crime when there are crimes to address?
Because going back to the good stuff about the Macpherson report, there is operational value in recording things that are not quite yet crimes, because you do need to know when there might be a risk of escalation. The problem is, however, if you slather on top of that sensible premise, a prevailing orthodoxy, that gender identity ideology is what we all believe in now. Any attempt to say that sex is real and it matters is seen as outrageous bigotry. Then people are reported for utterly ridiculous things.
Doesn't this also mean that opportunists might use this perception-based system to get one over their enemies?
Oh, absolutely. Somebody reported me to Wiltshire Police. What they'd done is they'd searched my tweets for the words trans and Nazi and just reported the lot, which is why my dog ended up on a police database under a heading of hatred against transgender individuals. So it's a picture of my dog, and I'd said, my dog would call me a Nazi for cheese.
And that was logged by the police?
Yes.
So, OK, so this is clearly a waste of police time. Let's be absolutely honest about that. Now, when Harry Miller took them to court and appealed this and won, and then the Home Office said to the College of Policing, you have to stop teaching police to record non-crime, then the College of Policing basically ignored the Home Office, didn't they?
Yes, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around why. And the only reason I can think of is this, that for decades now, people's financial ability to earn money and their professional reputations have been tied up in this whole industry around hate crimes. They can't let it go. It's the water in which they've swum. They've been told for decades that women like me are simply bigots. And so they just don't seem to be able to take on board the fact we now have a Court of Appeal judgment that says very clearly, your guidance was unlawful. And then what do the College of Policing do? There's a very sensible code of practice came out from Parliament. The College of Policing then produced their own consultation on their new guidance, which shows so clearly they just haven't got it.
So we should explain, really, the College of Policing are the body that are set up to train police officers. They're like a quango, right? And they created this idea of non-crime hate incident themselves, didn't they? And they put this through. This didn't come from the Home Office. This was a creation of the College of Policing. So why is it the case that when the Home Office is repeatedly saying to them, you've got to change your policy here, and they're not doing it, why doesn't the government abolish the College of Policing?
Well, that's a really important question, and I wonder if it's just because they haven't got anything to replace it with. I mean, the police do need guidance. The College of Policing has nothing to do with operational decisions, but it produces guidance on what's very important, such as recording crimes and non-crimes.
Yes.
So it would be quite a big thing to demolish, because that's the problem, isn't it? It's been in situ for quite some time now.
But all of this is really a question of freedom of speech, isn't it? Because part of our freedom of speech is that we can say offensive things, actually, or things that cause people to be upset or offended. That's part of it. You know, you can't have freedom of speech without the bad elements of it as well. So why... I mean, we've now got a situation when it's like a police state, where the police are sort of saying, we're going to decide what you can and what you cannot say. Surely that should be a priority for any government to address.
I would hope so, because it's really, really frightening. I kept checking with Wiltshire what they'd recorded, and I found some other stuff. The thing that upset me the most, though, was the very last thing I found recorded against me, where a police officer had written, she is entitled to her views, however wrong they are.
Wow.
So I wrote and I complained, and apparently that officer was sent on a day's reflection course, although wasn't punished. And I said, do you understand why this is so alarming? And they wrote back to me saying, oh, we understand you didn't like the equality and diversity form. I said, no, I didn't like it. It was rubbish. It asked me if my gender was the same as the sex I was assigned at birth. And there was no option to say, I don't have a gender, I have a sex and a personality. So yes, I didn't like that. But what I disliked much, much more was an individual police officer thinking he had the right to record against me the fact that I had the wrong views. And just this time, I hadn't been quite naughty enough to be criminal. But I was clearly escalating. There were 3 NCHIs recorded against me in the end. So that's clear evidence of escalation, isn't it?
But doesn't the College of Policing teach the police that they need to be impartial, politically and ideologically?
It's part of the police code of ethics. I mean, Harry gives the brilliant example. If you're policing, say, a march in Northern Ireland, you've got to be very careful when you're walking alongside that you're not seen to be marching in step.
Yes.
It's absolutely essential. If the police aren't impartial, well, then we'll see what happens. Millions of pounds are going to be wasted on investigating things which are just jokes.
Well, we've seen, for instance, the UN, the United Nations, tweeted just today, I think, or yesterday, this image. And I think if we can show this image, I think this is quite striking. And this is an image about hate crime. It's not just a comment, no to hate, and there's an image of that gun within a loudspeaker, the implication being that words are violence. They're conflating words and violence. That's coming from the United Nations, not from activists. It seems like the police here have fallen in line with that idea, that words can be just as harmful as violence. Do you think that's right?
Oh, yes. I mean, what's going on is there's definitely a European dimension. You know, people have gone on conferences and training courses. This is definitely a campaign with a wide remit. But it's so disturbing, this document. I mean, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights produced by the UN, Article 19, is very clear about the importance of freedom of speech. That tweet bizarrely references an action plan from 2019. So you might say, well, your action plan's not really achieved much in 4 years.
Yes.
But it keeps banging on about, you know, speech is very important, we will protect it. It doesn't say how, doesn't give any examples of when it's going to balance this discriminatory speech.
Yes.
And its definition of hate speech is fantastically wide. Anything that is considered discriminatory against anybody's claimed identity, and they mean anything. Your identity as an adult baby nappy wearer will be protected. And someone who says, well, I don't actually think that's very nice, and I don't really want you doing that around me, that will be hate speech, according to the UN.
So this is a real problem, isn't it? Because when you have... I mean, my view on this is that the police should not be policing what people say or think. No. That's a step over into authoritarianism. But if they are going to do that, then they would have to do it completely impartially, wouldn't they? Because we've had, for instance, an extreme trans activist saying that they were building up a snuff list of 50 gender-critical women that they wanted to murder, and that was posted on Twitter.
Well, that shows exactly the problem. I was recorded by the police as a barrister posting hate, my full name, my address, my email, my phone number. That clearly has a chilling effect. I was recorded for simply discussing my dog's liking of cheese, whereas this man felt emboldened enough by the current culture to tweet that he had a snuff list of 37 prominent gender-critical women who were up to be murdered. Now, there was action, I'm glad to say, and his membership of the Women's Institute was rather hastily cancelled, and I know people reported him to the police. But isn't it interesting that that man felt quite empowered to do that, to publish that?
Well, for a long time, Twitter hasn't published the sort of violent imagery that has come from extreme activists against gender-critical women. They've just sort of let that slide.
Yeah.
But they will kick you off if you misgender. I know that's changed now under Elon Musk. But that was the case for a long time, wasn't it? And so what we have here is an ideological capture of the people who are enforcing police codes. So is the solution just to get rid of police codes? Oh, sorry, speech codes. Just say whatever you want.
No, because free speech absolutism is another kind of terrorism. You cannot be free to say anything you want. I can't be free here and now to incite somebody to murder you because you're gay, and I don't like gay people. I can't. That would be a criminal offence, and rightly so. I mean, Article 10 contains within it those limitations. Freedom of speech is very important, but there have to be limits. I mean, defamation is another one, targeting somebody for abuse. The first step's got to be people not just giving lip service to the importance of freedom of speech, which, as case after case, judge after judge has said, is essential to a functioning democracy. The College of Policing consultation, I think, was so interesting because you wouldn't know, if you didn't know the history, that the reason they were consulting was because their previous guidance had been declared unlawful. There's not a flicker of that.
But the problem with the argument you've just raised is you're saying, we all know incitement to violence is illegal. The activists are saying that when their feelings are hurt, that's the same as physical violence.
Well, that's where we've got to focus on, because that's clearly nonsense. I mean, the American jurisprudence has got quite a lot of interesting case law because their First Amendment is even more forward-thinking than our Article 10. And a big concept then is imminence and proximity. And that's what's made the current situation so interesting, because the internet has become the playground where people hurl these insults. And it's not the same as thinking there's this man on the street saying things that are racist or horrible. It's somebody hundreds of miles away on the internet.
Yes.
But there doesn't seem to be that recognition of the lack of immediacy and proximity.
So, just before we end, can you tell us about this non-crime hate incident day of action? What is it you're going to
Yes, because naively we all thought after Harry's stunning victory in the Court of Appeal back in 2021 that this would be laid to rest. It clearly isn't. The College of Policing are just carrying on their own sweet way, ignoring the Home Secretary. So the 20th of May is John Stuart Mill's birthday. We think he's a highly significant figure, as you say, quoted by Mr Justice Knowles. We're asking everybody to make a data subject access request of their police force, and we've done a little how-to guide on the Fair Cop website. We would like to overwhelm the forces with these requests, and we'd like you to tell us what you find, and then tell us if the police won't delete it, because I suspect the bulk of what's now been recorded is as ridiculous and offensive as what was recorded against Harry and me.
And do we all have a legal right to access that information? OK, that's very interesting. And are they obliged to delete it now, given the Home Office ruling?
Well, this is the interesting thing. I'm in contact with one woman who raised a safeguarding concern and is now recorded as hateful, and the police are refusing to delete it. Now, that hopefully is going to go to court. But the principles of data protection, information that's recorded has got to be accurate. It is never hateful to raise a safeguarding concern. And that makes my alarm go up 100-fold. Harry had his freedom of speech curtailed, but this woman was making a safeguarding complaint.
So people can go to the Fair Cop website, is that right? And they can get guidance on how to do this?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Sarah Fillmore, thanks very much for joining me. Coming up on the show, I will be speaking to Denise Farmy, who is taking the Arts Council to an employment tribunal after being harassed for her gender-critical views. You're watching Free Speech Nation live on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Denise Farmy, a senior official at Arts Council England, is taking the organisation to an employment tribunal because she says she was harassed for being gender critical. Denise found herself faced with what she describes as a toxic working environment after she spoke in defence of LGB Alliance, a group that advocates for the rights of same-sex attracted people. Denise was signed off with stress after a petition was launched on the staff intranet account criticising herself and others with gender-critical beliefs. Reluctant to see her career ruined without a fight, she lodged a complaint with the Leeds Employment Tribunal in September 2022, and she's here to tell us more about it right now. Good evening, Denise. Thanks for coming.
Hi.
So firstly, perhaps you could explain to people what your job at the Arts Council is.
Yeah, well, the Arts Council England gives out grants to all English arts organisations and anybody doing cultural projects, and we have a range of different funding streams. So my job is to look at those applications, advise potential applicants and make funding decisions.
Yes.
And we're funded through government and through the National Lottery.
So let's talk a bit about LGB Alliance and what happened here. What was the specific case that started all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people know about LGB Alliance. It's an organisation it's quite a young organisation that was established about 3 years ago to represent the views of some same-sex attracted people. It made an application to, it's actually another organisation, the London Community Foundation, which had funding from the Arts Council to distribute to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. Now, the LGB Alliance made a successful application and secured just under £10,000 to do a film about gay men's lives under the Queen's reign, which obviously has changed tremendously in the past 50 years. It's been an incredible story. That grant was awarded, and there was immediately a kind of Twitter outrage where people said, well, the Arts Council funding, which essentially is where the grant came from, shouldn't go to LGB Alliance. And LGB Alliance have been completely vilified as transphobic, as hateful, just an appalling campaign of vilification.
We should explain that because they're LGB Alliance and a lot of groups cover LGBT.
That's
People
right.
have accused them of cutting out the T, but of course that makes no sense because they're just there to represent LGBT people, just like there are some organisations that just represent trans people, and that's fine as well.
That's
People
right.
just organise themselves, but they have been subject to a smear campaign, basically. And so when this application was approved, this Twitter storm happened. And what was going on within the Arts Council then at that point?
Well, the Arts Council at the time had about 650 to 700 members of staff. I've got to say it's a very collegiate workplace. And very unusually, a meeting was called for all staff, which was attended by a very high number of staff. This was an online meeting. And it was to discuss just one award. And if I can put that in the context of the previous year, we'd distributed over £900 million. We have never had a meeting about just one award of £10,000, less than £10,000.
And was that the response to the Twitter storm?
Yes, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was an unprecedented meeting. And as I say, I've worked for the Arts Council for 15 years. I've never attended a meeting about one very small
What
grant.
were they having the meeting for? What were they hoping to determine?
I think, to be honest, that's kind of the subject of my employment tribunal.
Right.
What's the context for this? But there was definitely disquiet amongst the workforce that this award had been made. And so the meeting just focused on whether this award should have been made or not. And at the time of the meeting, the award had been suspended.
Right. And what happened to you then? How did you
Okay, so the the meeting kicked off, and I thought it was going to be a neutral place where we had this kind of strange discussion. But it took a very, what I would feel is a very biased route, in which the position of the chair of the meeting, who's a senior member of staff, he felt very strongly that the grant shouldn't have been made to LBG Alliance. There were some technicalities around the grant, but he felt that the grant should be withdrawn, or at least shouldn't have been made.
Did he give a reason?
He felt they were an anti-trans and divisive organisation.
Which is, well, not true.
Yeah.
And a sort of a smear. It's libel. Well, it would have been libel had he published it. It's slander, sorry. Given that, did you object in the meeting itself?
Yeah, I mean, if you can imagine, I know we've all been to online meetings in the past 2 or 3 years, so there was lots of chat.
Yes.
And I wrote in the chat, they're not anti-trans, and there was quite a lot of opprobrium against me from not the majority of the meeting, because of course this was a huge meeting. There was 400 members of staff there, but from some colleagues felt very strongly that they were, and the tone of the meeting got more and more heated. And I found it really, really quite shocking, and it was a very unpleasant experience.
And what's happened since then? Because you're saying there's been harassment.
Well, I guess 2 things have happened. I found that experience very harassing, and 2 things happened. The first thing that happened was I made a complaint to my chair of the organisation to say, well, this is unbelievable that the views of individuals can start to dictate who gets access to public funding, because that is a very slippery slope in a democratic society. So I made a complaint about that, and it was a whistleblowing complaint, and I made it to the chair of the Arts Council. The second thing that happened was about 3 weeks later, it might have been a little bit less than that, a number of members of staff came together to launch an online petition against gender-critical people, and they didn't name me, but it was very strongly targeted towards me.
But that's a real problem in the Arts Council. I mean, it's problematic enough, isn't it, for the Arts Council to be so ideologically skewed in one way, or to suggest that they can't fund people who have certain perfectly legitimate and legal views.
Yeah.
But if they're starting to then police the opinions that are acceptable within the staff members, that's surely a huge problem.
I mean, the actual experience of the petition being launched, and unfortunately the petition was hosted by our staff intranet for 26 hours. It collected 100+ signatures and lots of revolting comments that were really unacceptable in a workplace.
Yes.
So that I requested for it to be brought down. It wasn't brought down. It was kept up for over 24 hours. And it was a dreadful experience to be on the receiving end. In terms of how the Arts Council, which you'll understand is the major funder of the arts in this country, arts and culture in England, it has a duty to deliver equality of opportunity for all applicants and to foster good relations between people. That's part of our legal duty under the Equality Act and under the public sector equality duty. It can't just decide as a body that it doesn't like certain viewpoints.
And this is interesting because
that's not a criteria of funding.
And since the Maya Forstater case, we know that gender-critical views are protected in law.
Absolutely.
And yet we're seeing again and again, aren't we, not just in the Arts Council, but in various corporations and institutions, those who do express those views are often demonised. I mean, this is a wider problem, isn't it?
Yeah, and unfortunately we're seeing that across the whole arts sector. I know of many case studies in which particularly female practitioners are losing their businesses, or they're losing their livelihoods, or they're gradually being edged out of organisations. And you'll understand that the arts is primarily, it's a freelance sector.
Yes.
Reputation is everything.
Absolutely.
So it's become a very censorious and hostile environment for people to work in. And I mean, that's obviously not good for the artists working in that space, but it's not good for audiences either.
No.
Because it means that the arts product is getting narrower and narrower, and is taking on a kind of thought policing, a moral tone that is just limiting freedom of expression.
Well, before we finish, it would be very important for you to explain where people can help you out. You've got a crowdfunder online?
Yeah.
And where can they find that?
Yeah, well, my case is on Crowd Justice. If you look my name up, Denise Farmy, or you look up Fighting Bias at the top of the Arts Council. I do have to raise £55,000. We're more than halfway there. This case has very strong merits, and I'm quite positive. I'm very confident that we can win this case, and it's important for the cultural sector too, I think.
Denise Farmy, thanks very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Well, still to come on Free Speech Nation, local government officials try rapping and male Canadian politicians don high heels. It's almost time for social sensations. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's time for Social Sensations, the part of the show that we devote to the very weird and not very wonderful world of social media. We're going to start with the Diane Abbott row, and we spoke about that earlier in the show. And comedian Danny Postel has given his verdict. Let's take a look.
OK, I'd like to make an apology about the comments that I've made today. And I specifically want to make apologies to Nick Hucknall, Ed Sheeran, Ron Weasley and Charlie Dimmock.
It's absolutely uncanny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you gigged with Danny? Do you know?
Yeah, I know him quite well.
Yeah,
So,
he's got a damn good Diane Abbott impersonation.
Yeah. Well, he was on Britain's Got Talent, I think. He got through to the final.
Brilliant. OK, we're going to move on now. This is the next video that went viral this week. We had the rapper Nohan on earlier. Turns out he's got a rival, and this is Trevor Holden. He's managing director of Broadland and South Norfolk councils. Let's see what he got up to.
May's local election is drawing near. Bring your ID to make your vote count. This is what democracy is all about.
Perfect.
Why do they do this?
It's sweet. It's kind of sweet.
You think it's sweet?
It is. It's sweet. He's just trying to...
Do you think there's a knowingness about it, that he knows how bad he is?
He's hanging with the kids. He's not trying to be good. He's just trying to be relevant in some way.
Do you think?
That's all.
I don't know. What do you make of that,
It
Leo?
reminded me of like an advert for yogurt in 1982.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I think, yeah, he shouldn't have attempted that. OK, look, we're going to move on now. This is Canadian politicians. They had the laudable aim of raising awareness about violence against women, but the method they used drew derision from social media users. So we can see the video here. I'll describe it for radio listeners. We've got some politicians in the chamber walking around in high... These are male politicians, by the way, walking around in large, high heels. All of the shoes look bright pink to me.
Or white. Sorry.
And so they've solved feminism, or solved domestic violence, is that what?
Well, no, I mean, it's really good that they're raising awareness of domestic violence, because before I saw this video, I didn't even know that you're allowed to beat your wife. So...
That's Leo Kersey's take on that. Scott, what do you make of that?
I think beating your wife is probably a bad thing.
No, I wasn't talking...
That's my take on it.
For goodness sake. The thing about this stuff is...
I said probably.
You know they use that phrase virtue signalling a lot, and people get quite sick of it because it's become a bit of a cliche.
Yes.
But that kind of thing, what else is it? It's, you know, you're not making things better.
No.
You're not actually... It's because it's quite hard to address a serious issue like domestic violence.
And it's hard to walk in high heels, too.
Well, that is true.
Yeah,
It's
it ruins your feet. But what was odd was the person in the front of the line, arguably could be the head of the council or whoever that is.
Yes.
Is mincing and prancing.
Mincing,
yeah.
right.
It looks insulting a little bit.
It looks like he's mocking women.
A little bit, yeah. They all are mocking women in that.
But then when you walk in high heels, it's difficult to walk in any other way than a prance, isn't it? Like, I mean, because it's hard. It's like wearing stilts.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you're both being very dismissive of this, and you know, people have been mocking this, but this one action actually completely ended domestic violence.
Yeah.
So I think a round of applause to these Canadian politicians.
I think you're applauding all alone there, Leo. I think. Yeah. OK, and finally, why did Hollywood star Paul Rudd turn up in a pub in Wrexham? Apparently, it's something to do with football, which is not my favourite subject, but let's have a look anyway. By the way. OK, so Paul Rudd, what was he in?
Yeah, he was in the 30-year-old Virgin.
Was he?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
He's one of those celebrities that you see him every now and then in...
He's innocuous, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm not being offensive. I mean, like,
No.
you don't really recognise him particularly.
He's been in a lot of stuff.
But
He's in a lot of stuff.
What's he doing here celebrating a football match? It's an odd thing.
So Ryan Reynolds owns Wrexham, along with some other actors. I think Liberace, the dog that played Lassie, and some of the animations in Toy Story own Wrexham, and it's a football club, and they beat Borehamwood, and it's big news apparently.
And they're real teams, are they?
The real teams that play football.
Yeah.
They scored goals.
Okay.
So it's actually a real sporting underdog story, which is handy because they've already got an introduction.
OK, well, it's quite clear that nobody on this panel knows anything about football, so we'll quickly move on to this part of the show. We normally talk through some of your unfiltered dilemmas, and you have very kindly emailed in your problems. This first one is from Jax, and he's actually said, should I buy Louis Chaffer's calendar? I think he's really dishy, but I'm a non-militant vegan. By the way, he won't like that picture because that was before he lost all the weight.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty
that's
sure.
Obviously from last week.
Right, yeah.
Louis Chaffer he's created this calendar. It's very bizarre. I don't really understand what it is.
I'm not quite sure why it's funny, but it is funny. But I can't tell why.
It is kind of funny, yeah. Do we have time for another unfiltered dilemma? Apparently we don't. So we're going to just chat about Louis Chaffer for another 30 seconds.
I think £23 for a calendar is just ridiculous. I'd buy it if it was a tenner, but apparently that's more than it costs to publish.
By the way, I should say that Louis Chaffer, the reason why he's lost all this weight is because he only eats meat now.
Yeah,
and
raw meat.
And all he does every day on Twitter is post images of raw meat with raw eggs and say, look at my breakfast, look how wonderful I am.
He only eats the yolks and he's not sure why.
Is that
Sounds like
right?
I'm going to break into song, but yes, he only eats the yolks and raw meat, and he's controlling his kidney.
And by the way, if you want to see what Louis Chaffer looks like, he's going to be here tonight on Headliners, so make sure that you watch that. But thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Dominic Raab lost his job, Elon Musk lost his rocket, and we lost the brilliant.
Hello there, welcome to your latest buzz update from the Mental Health Laboratory. After a mixed setup throughout the weekend, we are going to retain that theme at least into the start of the new working week as well. Low pressure is still going to be with us into Monday, even though it's slowly drifting